Hi, Imran. Thank you very much. Welcome to Nothing Stage by Curve Up. I'm not going to give any formal introduction to you. People who knows you, and we're going to have your LinkedIn and all of it in description to read you more. But want to tell you the Nothing Staged version of Imran Furkan for us. I know you from probably the day zero or day one of Global Tutor with the second transition. From there to now, uh, I personally become a fan of a lot more of your thing, but one is forecast about how you have forecasted things. Certain things close to reality has happened, certain things with a decent amount of deviation, but still it has been very inspiring to see how the forecasting and prediction. We today we have AI for it, but back in time predictions for it. So with that approach, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Definitely. It's personally my pleasure, and as of the brand's pleasure, there's a lot more association between you and us and the brand. But this today's context is about international. So I know the international is much of a larger scope, but for in youth and startups, when you look at from the lens of international, today we talk about foreign revenue and all of it which connects. So what is going international for you?
Well, I think the key point is both the mindset and also the action of doing it, right? So you can be a local company and be international in your mindset. And what I mean by that is that you do things from perspective of international standards. For example, for even a basic thing like being on time, in terms of delivery, which a lot of local companies don't value, right? Even if it's a local to local client, if you start delivering on times, basic project, right? And then because internationally that is a minimum norm. Then in terms of communication, follow up, uh, Sri Lankans, companies and individuals, when they don't want to, when they are overwhelmed, they don't pick up the phone, they don't respond to a message, and that's very rude. I am for sure, as a person, always I say, look, I'm too busy, or I'll get back to you, I'll give them a timeline, I'll follow up, because communication is critical. But Sri Lankans just go dark, and that's really rude from international perspective. Then that's thinking internationally. Then the other aspect of it is going international, which means actually bidding for and getting projects, delivering those projects, then getting repeat projects. So I think that is the action part of international, and I think there is also a third part, which is also making sure that at some point your operations preferably target the international market to a large extent, and your domestic market, is very small component of that, just to keep the operations going and pay for local currency stuff. But other than that, I think that's the main thing: mentality and also action.
Yeah, I really like that you got to think global before you go global, right? So thinking global, I'm sure it has a lot more practices and processes and procedures. But also on a complete different note, right? In terms of going international eligibility framework or minimize risk, right? So who is eligible to get a minimized risk? So what scale that you go in? Because some of the things in my personal experience, and probably if I connect with you, my early days when you were in Australia, I've got an opportunity to come for a higher education conference, but like you connected with someone. I still remember my meeting with National Australian Bank, NAB, and few other organizations. But when you were telling about thinking and going international, probably I had all the mistakes that you said. Uh, some of the individuals I don't even remember the names, right? I didn't come and send a request or follow up or anything. Most of it. So does it mean there's a framework of eligibility to say, hey, if you have these traits, you can think about going international, or this is where you think international. So is there any such, or is it something that you got to build?
A bit of both. I think the most important thing about being international and also, success overseas is, do you have something that they need to offer? If it is something that is in a very highly regulated market where they purposefully sort of made it difficult for you to enter, then you may not be able to sort of do that. And then there are other parts of the world which has I'll give you very good examples. So, for example, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, US, very highly regulated markets for certain services. But say the Middle East or Africa or the Pacific is still not there in terms of regulation, right? The regulation is actually part of quality, but it's also more than quality. It's actually a protectionist measure, right? So you need to find out where you can enter easily, go there, start building your brand and your cash reserves, and then one day you might be able to go to the other markets. What one of the mistakes that a lot of Sri Lankan companies make is that they straight off want to go to those developed markets, right? Which is sometimes difficult. It's not impossible, and it's you can get bits and pieces. It's a very more difficult, more competitive thing. So I think you figure out where you can enter fast first, then progressively start tackling other challenges later. But the whole world is your oyster. You should never rule out a country saying I cannot go there. You can. It's just a matter of time. And there's a phase of which how you build your life and your business, and if you're patient, you can get there. Because at some point you will make enough money in these intermediate markets that you can think of a long-term commitment to one of the developed markets as well.
But I think I really like that particular step process, because I also would call it's one of your like minimum risk terrains, right? Might be by the like number of hours it takes to get there, might be in terms of culture, reference, and then definitely the regulations. So it's very interesting to look at that, and also my adapt to that is, again, as you said, there's no concrete rules and regulations what can, but it's the most fit scenario. But also, how do you also see this particular economy is playing now? If you say the world, you are not to rule out any country out, but at contemporary economic conditions, probably where Sri Lanka is, plus some of the regions, economic regions, right? How do you see in terms of in a mostly Sri Lankan perspective, what is a good middle terrain to tap it? What are those, or a few of those? Maybe different by industry. So if you can enlighten on that
Yeah,
perspective.
yeah. So I think a lot of quite a few Sri Lankan companies that sell goods, say coffee, tea, etc., and some certain other products, they have found Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa, South America, a little less, as reasonably good markets to enter and do well. Pacific as well. They found less resistance there. Then some parts of Southeast Asia as well, but not maybe Singapore or,
Okay.
or Malaysia, but other parts like maybe Vietnam, Laos. There's some of the lesser developed parts of Southeast Asia. And with the developed world, you've also got to sort of do your timing. And I'll give you an example, right? So Dilma started in 1989, in late 80s, right? And they started in Australia first because Australia was going through sort of like a slowdown in the economy after a long time. And so they were able to sort of get into the supermarkets and other stuff like that. But after Australia has had 30 years of no, 30, when 1993 was the last recession, so 31 years of no recession. And everybody else has gone to Australia has found it very difficult because it's that
Tough.
the economy is doing really well, so therefore they don't are not open to new collaborations. So I think you need to figure out where different countries are and then find that opportunity to get in there.
Wow.
And Eastern Europe, a lot of people are very doing well. They're doing well in Africa and Middle East. So I think those are the markets that are open for Sri Lankans now. And I feel Australia, Canada, US, maybe Australia, New Zealand, that particular area, maybe even Japan, will start opening up if they have economic crisis at some point in the future. But you can make your money from these other countries and save and be ready to move in there.
Right. So again, it's like you get prepared for your ultimate approach, or a much more of a bigger approach. Connecting both. So you talked about a little bit of saving, right? So maybe it's a financial discipline, financial literacy, all of it. So when you are choosing this middle terrain, so thinking globally, thinking internationally, and going internationally, I think both of them are expensive business, or at least not cost effective per se. In that approach, how do you see the first step, right? Now, I know internet is accessible. There's nothing that not existing in internet, but still Do you go see the market, or do you go study the regulation? Because I have an experience in Singapore, a very lucrative market. When I went in, probably you know everything in and out. Just for the conversation, so we looked at this particular educator economy. There's only 400 odd schools where they are, get a clear market space, but we never checked the entry barrier. So we had a regulatory entry barrier by non-Singaporean getting into education business, especially around the schools and especially for the school teachers. Probably if I have done an audit on that back in time, but I would have saved 1 year of time and some good money. But I think that gave us a good experience about going international. But however, on that perspective, what is that first step of going? Like, let's say I have think internationally, but when I want to go internationally, what should be my first few costing line items?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing you need to do is obviously a market research and also reaching out to different partners. That's a lower risk strategy. And depending on the enthusiasm of those partners, right? It's a simple thing. If there are people willing to work with you, I mean, it makes sense to work with them, right? What I've noticed is people are quite stubborn sometimes, and they want to work only in particular countries, and they are forever trying those countries without really looking at other options that are feasible. Ultimately, if you're getting paid in USD, you're getting paid in USD. I mean,
Yes.
so I don't understand why you have to be one of the four, like look at some of the developed countries only, and I think that's the key part of it. Find countries where you can enter easily, and also people you want to enter with, who can find partners easily with. That's a good starting point. And also, you've got to be you also sort of need to sort of look at other demographics as well. I'll give you a good example. Like South Asia may look, I have learned this hard way, right? I couldn't understand why most Sri Lankan companies wouldn't go to Maldives, for example. But then market is so small that it sometimes doesn't make any sense. And same thing with places like Nepal, then Bhutan, you really can't enter. Though it makes sense to go first to South Asia, there are inherent problems of scale and size and so on. So that is a challenge
Yeah.
that you need to do. And I mean, if you look at some of Sri Lanka's banks, they've now a commercial bank has been in Bangladesh now. HNB has brought a bank in Bangladesh, so that has country has scale. Talking to other CEOs or people who they're like, we're not going to go to really small markets because the time, the effort is not worth it. So I think it's
It's
a very,
different.
very careful, very focused strategy on where makes sense to go to.
I think brilliant again, right? So for different industries, because now it's beautiful to see what is a blessing is a curse and what a curse is a
Of course,
blessing. For
of course,
example, differently bankrupted market right
of
now
course.
may be a curse to them, but a blessing in terms of an entry to the
Of
market, in
course.
terms of
Exactly. I
eh,
think that's key point.
the
Yes.
entry barriers, right? So
Yes.
so it's not the optimum performing condition when you're
Yes.
also again the futuristic
Of
and
course.
forecast and all of it. And again, I bring my expert driven opinion where this is where probably I would reach out to you, a personality like you, when I want to brainstorm about these markets, because especially on the forecasting dots, like economy, the geo economy of it, because usually from a very entrepreneurial standpoint, especially in Sri Lankan homegrown entrepreneurial standpoint, it's always your concept and a marketplace.
Of course.
You don't think you are a regulatory environment because you're very
Yes.
comfortable in the home terrain,
Of course.
right? Because when we did our debut launch in UAE, one of the things that we had to learn and go through is KHDA,
Okay.
that is Knowledge and Human Development Authority, and they have a even regulatory option. And I was given an opportunity to present one of our STEM kits to an airline, and that's where I learned the airline protocol and OSH, Operational Safety Health, for them to fly in. So I think with all these regulatory doesn't naturally come in thinking. It's an exercise. So again, Curve Up as an organization also trying our level best to incubate this as an experiential approach when you are incubating or going international as a strategy. So linking to that is, what is that minimum viable exercise? So if you are to tell, hey, good, yeah, maybe again it's industry specific, geography specific, all of it. But what is that minimum viable exercise that to say, do this, you will understand that whether you can go to this market or not. So this can be simple as a visit, or this can be complex as assessing market environment. But only challenge, where I'm rephrasing this question a little more detail, is for startups. when it's actually startup at that stage, the most of this extra element of assessing market environment, forecasting, and all of it is very gray, because probably the minimum viable product is what they're still talking about. The value addition is not done, or value addition could be done as per the market. Because how do you see this not so built but a very flexible MVP model? What is that first exercise to say that let's do this to go international?
No, I think the first thing is to write to partners,
Right to
see
partners.
how many are interested. You find that nobody is writing back or is not interested, then you see a problem there. Either there is a credibility issue because we are from a developing country, right? So they may not understand you or stuff like that. The second thing is it may be a saturated market, so then they don't really see the need for a new person to come in, or they are not very open to international collaboration. So that's something I've noticed. Some people
Okay.
are really, they're very scared to collaborate outside with outside parties. So I think those are the things you
No,
need to
no.
look at. So once you see there's some interest, then you sort of look at, okay, how can we collaborate a little bit more, on initial few few products that you can put out there, followed up by visits. Obviously, the only way you can build a strong relationship is sitting across the table from your partner, having a coffee or something like that, and they seizing you up and you seizing them up. And once you size, each other up, I think then you can look at a longer term collaboration as well. The most important thing to realize is your market, slowly but surely growing.
Mm.
I mean, if a lot of one of the biggest mistakes that people do is that they to say that they are in a market, they would do say one or two sales per month, or even if it's a very small product, right? Or if they even once or two sales per quarter or whatever, and then they're happy to say we are in this market. But you must ask yourself over a period of time, do you have the resources? Is it worthwhile to have this as a market? And sometimes you say no, you just walk away because you're missing opportunities in markets where you can grow. And while it's not a risk mitigation strategy to be in only a handful of markets, makes a lot of financial sense to be in those markets, right? And then once those markets grow, you have enough reserves, you can look at testing, more difficult markets. I think the key thing is to see really good growth on a sustained basis if you want to be in a market. That is why sometimes when you see big multinationals, they pull out of countries, right? Because it makes no sense to be here. Now, I'll give you a good example of Fonterra. Fonterra is getting out of the milk business, right, in Sri Lanka.
Mhm.
They're also getting out of the milk business in Australia. It's a developed market and next to New Zealand, which is right close to. Because now they're not making any money really from milk, but it has a lot of regulatory headaches, right? So the two markets they were in, they're moving out. Our guys were protesting against Fonterra, we reduce milk powder prices, all that. For them, it makes no sense. They are now the main market is to provide bakery products.
Wow.
Right? It's a B2B business. They don't want to deal with B2C. They're out, right? And they're going to hedge the future of the business on bakeries and business to business. So the ability to come up, multinationals do this all the time, but our companies from developing countries, they don't want to give up a market. Sometimes you just got to do that because you just have limited resources and it's very competitive world today, right? So you need to know what's working, and if one segment is not working, just let go of it.
I really like, sometimes you have to give to gain, right?
Absolutely.
So you give up a market to
Absolutely.
gain a market, because that also connects to the capacity and
Of course.
capability on
Of
your
course.
focal point. So I think that's brilliant. So my takeaway from that is you really to understand it's not just going international, but also what is your whole business service model. Because where I'm again connecting one of the last few point is globalization, right? So I know the local economy purse all of it, but because of globalization, your access to internet, access to personality, the geographical barriers were removed. So still you can be one business service provider, but which has international standards. Still, some of the companies, if you look at in Sri Lanka, they are not affordable in Sri Lanka. It's just that across their countries, their service is the same, right? So models of that nature. So now let's pivot a little bit more from a uh, industry standard human resource capability. Now, for a Sri Lankan organization, let's since you're talking a little bit of innovation and all of it, we are still not a manufacturing or a production economy mostly, but that's directly exports, right? So export market discussion can be different, but let's take an innovation standpoint. Do you think Sri Lanka as a destination, right, for us to go global as a Sri Lankan homegrown company, or Sri Lankan entrepreneur goes global with a different country's establishment? This may mean the same to a national reward, but in terms of organization structure to going international versus a entrepreneur moving out and starting a business. So how do you see this with the current Sri Lankan context? So just to simplify, whether organization to go international is more easier possible in current context of Sri Lanka, or individual go and start international as an entrepreneur, and the innovation service industry and the human resources of Sri Lanka. How do you connect these dots?
Depends what your offering is. So, for example, if you're into IT, the company may be able to go overseas with a product that is, in demand globally. Quite a few people have done that. In terms of certain services, for example, I know certain engineers who go and work on projects in the Pacific, in other parts, on a consultancy basis. That's possible as well. In terms of going out and setting up entrepreneurship, tough because you need a lot of capital. But if you have capital from your current Sri Lankan business, go for it, because very small market, right? 22 million people. There's not much of a future only being here. I honestly don't. I mean, unless you're selling, something like a basic staple like rice, where we have a oligopoly of four companies. Really, it makes no sense for everybody else. You've got to go out. So I think depending what your offering is, what model to go out would differ.
Yeah,
So I think that's what
that's
you have to look
pretty
at.
much
Yeah, there's no uniform thing.
thing.
Okay, that only as a company should you go out, or as an individual should you go out. It depends on other things. Yeah.
Yes. So to kind of getting to the summary of this, right? Now, we everybody say the growth has a lot to do with the foreign currency,
Mhm.
right? Because again, in other words, if you bring to the books of going international, it's about earning in other currencies,
Mhm.
right? In simpler transformation. So, what in format of the foreign economies, foreign exchange, always there's this conversation about you bill in foreign currency and bring the money to Sri Lanka, and there's been a very humble, not accusation, but kind of feedback to the IT industry of Sri Lanka that we don't really bring the money out here, but we bill it in US dollars or whatever the foreign currency. So your foreign currency enabling and going international, and that's again connecting to the homegrown company. What is the connections? How do you see this?
Very good question. Very, very good question. So my view slightly differs from what a lot of people think. I think if you're a Sri Lankan company and you're exporting and you have paid all the taxes you need to pay, and all the duties and everything else, I think your foreign currency is your foreign currency. It is not the country's foreign currency. One of the biggest mistakes people think that Sri Lankan business's foreign currency is the country's foreign
Okay.
currency.
Yes.
And that is never the case anywhere in the world.
Yes.
Right? An American company's foreign currency is that company's foreign currency, right? It doesn't matter whether it's a developed country or developed. I mean, I know India has rules like Sri Lanka where you have to force send back remittances, but a lot of Indians, particularly rich Indians, are just simply setting up overseas companies, branches or whatever, and then just doing billing from overseas. I think your currency is your currency. And if
Nice.
anybody thinks that it is the country's thing, I think they need to be
Oh.
educated, because what happens that way is, and I'll tell you what the story several IT company
Yes.
CEOs told me during the last year or so, during the economic crisis and COVID. They said, look, Imran, when during the economic crisis, I couldn't access my own foreign currency, which I had brought Sri Lanka in my company account, to pay Google, to pay CloudStrike, to pay whatever, Amazon, whatever that you needed to pay for services, and to pay my staff. That is my foreign currency. So what did I do? I set up subsidiaries in Singapore or Dubai or whatever. And I'm never bringing that money into this country, because I learned my lesson from what happened in the.
Correct.
So I think till the trust is earned from the companies by regulators and the country itself, don't expect them to bring the money back.
Right.
And if you were a company, my advice to you is it's your foreign currency and do what is best for your currency.
Utilize it
Yes.
in the
Obviously,
most
don't misuse laws
correct,
in the
correct,
country that they
correct,
are there.
correct,
But nothing prevents you from setting up a subsidiary somewhere
correct,
else
correct.
from day one, and then using that currency for whatever you want. It's your foreign currency. Don't break any laws, but it's not the country's foreign currency.
Where I finding it very interesting, it also is you get that particular opportunity of not only Sri Lanka is your supplier market,
Absolutely.
so you can source from
Of course.
international, and that's it's very important in terms of any innovation industry. Let's take for example us.
Of course.
Now we deal with some of the other countries'
Of course.
supplies, especially in China and Vietnam, and some of
course.
the interventions we do, and then you connect the Gulf country councils and GCC and all of it. So there's this particular foreign currencies required where most of it also could be because you're also a startup going there, right?
Of course.
So there's your cost of service.
Of course.
So the cost of service demands a lot of international supply.
Of course.
So I think in that perspective also, but I really like the point, earned foreign currency is your currency.
It
Right?
is.
Do what is right for the business, and that's very logical. That's economical. Right. So let's dive into a little bit of feedback of my very, very probably last question. Now, we talk about economies, we talk about industries, we talk about different business models and all of it. But with how COVID accelerated big data and data in general in accelerated in business environment, I think AI is doing the same, and software industry is taking different formats and all of it. Going international, how dynamic it is in terms of industry, in terms of geopolitics or geoeconomics, and our reference to and also let's not forget the fact most of us own a Sri Lankan passport. The process of going international and setting up and all of it. How dynamic and how vulnerable this environment of going international from Sri Lanka right now?
Well, it's funny. It's actually a lot more easier than it was during the war.
Okay.
So some of us who grew up during the war, life is much more difficult, and so nobody can really complain how things are. Of course, there are with the Sri Lankan passport, there are a lot of issues, travel issues. Your visas don't come for international markets on time. There are issues like that. I think, and also opening bank accounts and all sorts of things. But I think that the key part is there are facilitators who can help you set up accounts and set up companies. And I think you need to use them, obviously. I think nothing is really impossible. I think with a bit of planning and a lot of patience and sort of connecting with the right people, you can make a huge difference in your own life, and you can go international if you want to. I also think you need to be very focused. So one of the mistakes even I as an individual have made is that we've had too many legs in one, like, oh, I have to be here and where there and everywhere. Figure out one or two places and then stick to it.
Focus.
And I think that's why one of the mistakes that people don't make is that they don't utilize everything out there to do it. There's always a way. You just got to keep trying. So, for example, if one person can't make a connection to you, you have to keep trying, make other people to do that. And I think it's possible. I think today, more than any time in history, I think it's possible to do a lot of things internationally. There's someone who can help you. Just you need to tap into it. And the way to tap into it is networks.
Okay. I think I love this particular statement of conclusion of can-do attitude to go international. Again, as individual, I'm sure even after podcast, I'm going to reach out to you of a lot more doing an architecture of going international and doing some logics, because I believe that's very important. But again, Curve Up as a responsible empowerment organization also going to do whatever the initiative we can do to support and go international, create programs or support or aid programs to see how this interfacilitation can happen. Experience is learning. So I think, Imran, few takeaway is think global first.
Of course.
Right? Before action and
I mean, in your day-to-day lives,
yes,
you cannot suddenly become international because you have something fancy. In everything you do, you've got to think what are the international norms?
Correct. And the second one is about You never know what is the right time to enter and right time to exit. The bigger guys can exit, smaller guys can enter in the most vulnerable, bankrupted time. So a curse could be a blessing, and a blessing could be a curse in going international. So look at that, very smart of time of entry and patience is a second takeaway. And the final takeaway is it's very very globalized, and so before the final, I would say your foreign ex or the foreign currency, what you make is yours,
Absolutely.
right? So it's a very strong statement. And the last but not the least is going international has become easier than ever, but
Absolutely.
it's about the commitment of making it happen and commitment to the market, right? Thank you very much again. As a personality, there's a lot more that you can enlighten the young budding entrepreneurs, and people could reach out to you about few more international forecast and economy forecast. I know it's not limited that too,
Of
but
course.
as part of this, we would like more of young startups to reach to individuals and personalities like yours, because I think that has always made me one step closer to the market. Some of the strategies and discussions we had. So we as experientially will keep trying going international, and we'll keep sharing. Again, thank you, Imran, on
Pleasure.
Nothing Stage, that we will interact more with Nothing Stage to go international. Thank you.
Thank you.